Mr. Sanjo Hazarika, if I can come to you first on this. The BJP leaders have, of course, made it about how they have been responsible for restoring peace in the Northeast, how insurgency has been tackled effectively, and they believe the timing is appropriate. But from your understanding, sir, do you agree when the Home Minister says it's because and it is as a result of the growing peace in the region, insurgency depleted? Is that what you believe, that the timing is appropriate and the atmosphere is conducive in the Northeast for this decision?
Well, I think that the decision is very appropriate. I've seen a list of the districts in Assam. I'm yet to see the list of the districts in Manipur and Nagaland. I know that in both the latter states, the areas under 15 police stations, the Disturbed Areas Act has been removed. AFSPA has not been removed. It's the Disturbed Areas Act which enables AFSPA to be utilized and implemented, which has been removed in these parts of the three states, which is, I think, a very significant development. It means civil society has been, of course, demanding the repeal of AFSPA, but I will believe for a long time that it is basically the strategic change of dealing with AFSPA, the crisis or the concerns about AFSPA by actually lifting the Disturbed Areas Act. That is actually the way to go. Because then you can do it step by step. So this is a step-by-step effort. Now, you must remember, I was on the Justice Reddy committee to review AFSPA. We called for the repeal. That was 15 years ago. Now, to see this happen today is a matter of great joy, I think, for many people. But it is one step forward, and I believe the center would need to take a few more steps to ensure that the other districts are also dealt with in this manner. But I'll say one thing, that I think it's important to perhaps retain AFSPA or the Disturbed Areas Act on the border. I think the central government would be concerned about lifting it from these marginal points.
Okay, so fair point, sir. You're saying that you are a big advocate of repeal of AFSPA, but you're concerned about those disturbed areas, the volatile areas around the state borders. And yes, of course, we've reported a number of incidents recently of interstate border dispute and violence. Colonel Pillai, as someone who has served in the Northeast, what, according to you, should be the right criteria for a decision like this? Because I'm asking you this because often it is made political as well. There are many who believe that this is done as an outreach ahead of the other state elections in the Northeast.
The AFSPA, I think, has long been used there, and it has not altered the manner of the insurgencies that we've seen there. And all interventions by the armed forces should have an end state in mind. We cannot have such prolonged use of armed forces because they're definitely not designed for this kind of an employment. The armed forces are prepared for fighting wars. To use them in internal security duties is clearly an extension. So using them for such prolonged times, which with the acts in, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is something that the British had created in 1942. With a few cosmetic changes, it came in 1958, and then we've been applying them in Nagaland and Kashmir and Assam and other places. So I really feel like, even as a soldier, having been there, like what Mr. Hazarika just now mentioned, that there are some areas that you need to have these acts in place. But definitely to have prolonged use, what is the aim of having the armed forces there? It is, if you see, the Indian Constitution guarantees certain fundamental freedoms and doesn't discriminate us on the basis of our region or our religion or our, so what is applicable to, say, to parts of India, mainland here, is also applicable there. So when you actually revoke certain privileges and rights for these people, give arbitrary powers to kill people, and these are things that are, it's like putting a person constantly in the ICU. There is a person where you are constantly under the thing. You can't really, it's like being on a ventilator. So what has been done by the government is something that is waiting to happen, should have happened a long time ago, because the political process had actually outsourced the entire internal security system to the armed forces. So when
Yes. And
incidents
that's the very
happen,
primary question, which even, like, as somebody who grew up in Assam, I used to wonder, why do we need the army, to be imposed only on the people of the Northeast and J&K? Why can't the state police handle it? And now, of course, if I'm not mistaken, this is a sentiment shared by a lot of people. There's also a sense of hurt and a sense of alienation because this was only in the Northeast and in J&K. Mr. Vora, in your understanding, do you agree that this should have happened long ago? This kind of an act has, overstayed its welcome.
Well, you're right. It should have gone long ago. Now, let us see. First, let us start with the Northeast. Now, Tripura, it is no longer there. Mizoram, it is no longer there. From Meghalaya, it was withdrawn from some time back. Arunachal also. Now, the areas only remained these three. When I was Home Secretary Manipur also, then also we had mentioned at that time that certain areas where there is total peace, it should not be there. A couple of years ago, I led a delegation to Manipur on the behest of the government of India.
Yes.
And again, this recommendation was made. I think somewhere there was this streak of being adamant by the army and by the central government. I'm glad that that adamant attitude has gone, and it is definitely a welcome step. Now, certain areas it will be needed definitely, because where there is violence and areas are well known, mostly they are in Manipur and in Nagaland, especially the border areas, and some areas in Assam. But I have a feeling that now with the improved situation in these areas, Army will be able to concentrate more on those areas where it is disturbed areas are there now. Maybe they'll move more troops also in those areas. And I'm very hopeful that very soon in certain more areas also it will become possible for the government of India to withdraw. I think it was more of, as I said, more of an attitude, and I'm glad that they have given up.
Mr.
And
Hazarika,
congratulations,
right.
and congratulations, Afridi, to the people of the Northeast who were agitating, the state governments, the state police, and now, of course, to the army and the central government. I'm glad that they are all now at the same place. They have all acted as one stakeholder in the entire issue.
Yes, even as you say that, and you made a very good point when you said that perhaps now the army can be better utilized in other areas where they are more required. Mr. Hazarika, do you also believe that, the fact that the army was deployed for this, to actually implement this kind of an act, and let's be, very clear that there were some draconian provisions of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which gave them a lot of liberty, which gave them immunity, even in the case of a botched up operation. So do you think, Mr. Hazarika, it has taken an incident like the Oting incident in Nagaland to shake up the conscience of the nation, to wake up the authorities, because only after that you had this committee that led to this decision?
Well, I think, Afrida, it's part of both an immediate process, an immediate impact of the Oting tragedy, but also sustained campaigns over a long period of time by civil society groups, by scholars, by people who have been in government or out of government, saying that this law is a draconian law and needs to go, or at least review it. Now, this is the second or third review that has happened. And definitely the Oting incident was a tragic issue that, in a way, forced this to come about. Because if you look at across the Northeast, it is much more peaceful than it perhaps has been in decades. I mean, we are both from Assam.
Yes.
And we have seen bad times in Assam. And as the Chief Minister said, since 1990, it's been in place. And for it to be lifted from 23.5 districts is a remarkable decision. So, but we must still remember that the AFSPA hasn't gone. It's not been repealed. It's still there.
No, we get that.
The laws, the sections that you say are objectionable, still there. It's just been taken away for the time being because the disturbed areas tag has been lifted, which is some of us have been saying for some time, this is the right way to do it. If you, because everybody needs a space-saving formula, no? Nobody wants to lose
You have
face.
served
Everybody
as
wants
the
to gain.
director of Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, and this has been a human rights issue across the globe. This AFSPA Act has resonated because of the kind of incidents and AFSPA-related violence that has happened in the Northeast. Some of it is, of course, still fresh in our memory. Even the nude protest in Manipur, for instance. There are many such instances. But what I want to also draw viewers' attention to is the fact that, and recently, there was a major incident in a border dispute, Mr. Hazarika, which you're aware, where 6 cops, Assam cops, were shot dead in the border conflict. Now, that kind of incident, again, to be a devil's advocate here, kind of makes people feel that, well, there could be dormant insurgent groups. It's not as if everything is hanky-dory, and there needs to be certain caution.
Let me interrupt you there. That was an incident between 2 government authorities, agencies. I mean, you can say that the different groups were involved from certainly one side, one state. But the AFSPA, the Disturbed Areas Act, is essentially to deal with insurgency and the violence that accompanies it, and then the state pushes back. So it's an instrument of state, really, much more than anything else. I mean, the clashes between the 2 states and other such incidents that have taken place in other states between other states of the region should be resolved politically between as is happening within Meghalaya and Assam just 2 days ago. So that is one way of doing it: dialogue, talk, conversations, engagement. And you see, in this process, what the amazing thing that people don't notice, and this has been visible actually for the last 20 or 30 years, people from the Northeast, especially the states that we're talking about now, have engaged with the rest of India very competitively and in a very engaged fashion, because they've taken up jobs, they've traveled, they're studying here. The Northeast is very much visible in the rest of India than it was, say, 20 years ago. So there is engagement, which I think is the other way of dealing with this issue.
Okay, quick last word, Colonel Pillai and Mr. Vora. Colonel Pillai, you first. I heard the Assam Chief Minister's, I beg your pardon, I heard Mr. Kiran Rijiju actually saying that people who were part of the problem have now become part of the solution. And we know, and the number of instances where former insurgents have joined the political process, have even become the heads of state in the Northeast. So in that sense, do you feel that, this is again going to pave the way? Do you see the end of insurgency in Northeast with this kind of a decision?
A country like India, the strength lies in the fact that our country, our government, whether it be the armed forces or the organs of the government, wouldn't like to see its people defeated by it. It likes to mainstream them into the process, and it takes a lot of casualties on its own. It shows a lot of patience. If you study insurgency patterns in India and our neighboring countries or the rest of the world, where America has responded to insurgencies or Pakistan responds to them, it shows a little. So you mentioned the example of Lal Denga, who led the Mizo National Front, and then when he became part of the political process, where people were mainstreamed and they became part of the solution rather than the problem.
Yes.
So the inherent strength of countries, democratic countries like ours, lie in our fact, in our charter. So I think very clearly, like what Mr. Rijiju said, it is evident that the government would. I know it's the easiest thing to go and kill people. Despite all the draconian acts, I agree that there have been excesses carried out by the armed forces. But I must also admit that there has been great restraint shown by the armed forces. We are remembered more for our aberrations than what we have actually sacrificed. I know of many people who would rather, hold fire. But then, of course, these things, even if there's one aberration, it's not forgivable. The incident that happened in Rotten is not
absolutely
forgivable.
Okay, Mr. All right. Very quickly, I just have 30 seconds. I just have about a minute. Mr. Vora, if I can quickly take a quick last word from you. You were witness, of course, while you were serving in Manipur to, what Iram Sharmila fought for, and how that long-drawn process went on of her hunger strike, which again drew the world's attention. Finally, you see something like this happen. Mr. Vora.
It was mentioned that people who are part of the problem are now part of the solution. Partly it applies to the army also. Partly it applies to the central government also, and to the state governments also. So I think good now that all have agreed on this issue. But to say that insurgency will go away, it will not. The only way is dialogue. Dialogue has helped in Mizoram, as we all know it. It had helped initially in Nagaland case also. Now also it is helping. So I was glad to read some days back that the defense minister had made a statement in Manipur asking all the insurgent groups there to come to the table and talk to them. So I think if this process of negotiations and talking to the people, if this is continued in a very serious manner and no politics is played in this entire issue, things will certainly improve, and a day may come when insurgency gets totally finished in the Northeast.
Let's hope. On that positive note, thank you so much, Mr. B.L. Vora, Colonel D.P.K. Pillai, and Sanjo Hazarika for joining us here on Mirror Now this evening.